Hi, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Freshly Read Books. First of all, thank you to Kieran from KDBooks for tagging me in this. I was like teetering back and forth, was I really gonna do this on July 8th? Actually, that's not that bad. I thought this was later. I mean, this won't be posted for a few more days, but you know what? I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it as a win. But it is a bit past the mid-year point. But at least now I know all the books that I read for the first half of the year and can use those in deciding the answers to these questions. So thank you for tagging me in this and giving me an excuse to actually do it. Okay, so we've got how many? Oh my gosh, 13 prompts. All right, let's do this. First is best book you've read so far in 2020. And this one was really hard. I think this one's like the hardest one to answer because there's been a lot, and there's been a lot that I've loved. I was really close to going with the Overstory, but I did just talk about that. And also, I finished it like 2 days into the new year. I read the bulk of it in 2019, technically. So I decided instead to go with Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It was just, I talked about this also very recently in my June wrap-up. So this is one of my most recent reads, but I swear I think about that book like 10 times a day. And especially, I find myself like thinking of it so much when reading other books that are about similar topics and have similar themes. Like right now I'm reading The Hate You Give, and it's been really beneficial reading like a real life nonfiction account from a Black man in America, and then now reading a novel about a young Black girl in America. So it's just kind of nice to hear that perspective. I did listen to this book, which I think was really great just because the author is the person that narrates it. So hearing him tell his story quite literally, it was just really great. And I seriously, I know I've already said it, but I really recommend it. You should definitely read it. Or listen to it. It's such a great listen. Okay, the second one, best sequel you've read so far in 2020. I mean, okay, I don't read a lot of series. So far, series that I've read this year, or like books that I've read that have been a part of a series that aren't the first book in it, is The Lord of the Rings, which, to be fair, is technically all one book that was published in 3 different parts, so I don't even know if that counts. The Selection series, which like I'm not gonna choose one of those. Like they're super fun reads, but like I couldn't give it like a favorites spot. And then I was like really trying to think, because I was like there has to be something. Oh my gosh, actually I just thought of one that makes more sense than the one I was gonna pick. I'm an idiot and forgot that I read The Lost World, which is the second book in the Jurassic Park series, which I do have here, but it was for a different prompt. But this, in thinking about it now, this was actually my favorite sequel of 2020. What I was thinking about choosing, which I do still want to say now because I've like prepped myself for it, but although I felt like it was like kind of cheating at the time, was The Strange Bird by Jeff Vandermeer, which is a novella that comes between his first book, Born, in the Born series, and then his second book, which is Dead Astronauts, which I haven't read yet. So this kind of comes between them, so it's not really like a sequel, and it's not totally about like the same people or anything, but it was still really, really good. It's basically about this new type of creature, which is kind of a bird, but it's very difficult to describe, and in fact is described in many different ways throughout the book, changes a lot throughout the book. But you're from that perspective, which is really cool because Born has a similar character named Born, but you get the perspective of Born through a human's perspective. So it's kind of cool to see the strange bird from the strange bird's perspective. Okay, which I did. I really enjoyed this, but I have a hard time calling it a sequel. It's not really. So now looking back, The Lost World would actually be my favorite sequel of 2020, like hands down. I absolutely loved it. Once again, I talked about this in my June wrap-up, and I went on and on singing praises for it. So next is new release that you haven't read but you want to. So I'm pretty bad at keeping up with new releases. Basically, the only way I do that is through Book of the Month. So I picked the last book I got from Book of the Month, which is The Vanishing Half. But I've been hearing amazing things about it, and I want to read it. In fact, I would have started it like now. This would be the book that I would be currently reading, except that I happen to pull it for the reading rush that's happening later this month. So now I have to save it until that happens. So it's just a little bit killing me, but I'm getting past it. And I'm very excited to get to this one, which is the only reason why I haven't gotten to it yet. This one I did talk about in my July TBR, but to give you a little bit of a backstory, it's about two twins. Both are black, but one is white passing, and the black twin stays in the black community, and the white passing twin goes on to marry a white man, and she's living kind of like this other life compared to the one she grew up in, and I believe like just nobody even knows about her past at all in general. So very interesting read, and everybody's been talking about this so much so that people are going back and reading Brit Bennett's other book, The Mothers. So now I want to get that, and I haven't even read this yet, so like... Okay, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This for me is probably going to be Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I have read almost all of Fredrik Backman's books, with the exception of one. I actually have a video that I filmed that was originally going to come out when this video is going to come out. That was like completely about Fredrik Backman, but I decided to postpone that to next week just because this is like the mid-year freakout tag, and I felt like I'm already posting mine a little bit late, and I didn't want to be really late. But if you want to know all of my thoughts on Fredrik Backman and what books you would want to read first, or if you've never read him, or I don't know, just fun things, fun synopses of each book, or how I would rate each book in order, then feel free to check that out when it does come out. You might want to subscribe just so that you make sure that you check it out when it comes out. Just saying. But anyways, Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I did look into what this was about for that video so that I could say, and now I don't remember it all, but it sounded so good. So it is about an apartment building being held hostage, and there's people that are there for an apartment viewing. There's more to the synopsis, but that's honestly like really all that I want to know going into it. It just, I don't know, it sounds like such a good premise, and I'm really, really excited for this one to come out and to read it. So, biggest disappointment. I feel like this won't shock anybody that watched my July wrap-up. It's gotta be The Guest List. I was so excited to read this book. Once again, I don't know if it was because I read two really great thrillers right before this one, so maybe that ended up playing a part in how much I enjoyed this one, but it had the perfect setting and the perfect setup to be a book that I would love, and then just fell short. So yeah, I go on about this for a while in the wrap-up, so I'm not going to do it again. Also, I feel like almost guilty for saying that I didn't like this just because some of my favorite booktubers really liked this book. But, you know, not every book is for every person. And even if you mostly agree with somebody, you might still have differing opinions on certain books, and I can accept that. But yeah, biggest disappointment. So the next prompt is biggest surprise. For me, this was a heartbreaking work of staggering genius. This is written by Dave Eggers. He's more well known for his book, The Circle, because that did become a movie with both Tom Hanks and Emma Watson in it. I read The Circle. It was my first book by Dave Eggers that I read, and I read it over 3 years ago. It was actually my book club's first book, and like first book discussion we had. And most of us really did not like the book. I could talk for a long time about why I didn't like that book. I'm not saying it was all bad. It was more just that it didn't feel like it was bringing anything to the table that was new or necessary. And I'm not saying that a book needs to do that, but it definitely portrayed itself as a book that would do that. And honestly, I was like, I wish I had just read 1984 again, because that's all this was, but put in modern times. And I don't know, sometimes that feels very pandery to me. So I kind of wrote Dave Eggers off altogether, which, my bad, I shouldn't have done that. His other books are so different than The Circle. But then later I was talking to my boyfriend Curtis's sister about Dave Eggers and about the Circle, and she was telling me that, oh no, I should read more by him because some of her favorite books are by him, and she lent me this book, which I only still have months and months later because I have not seen her since then because, COVID. But anyways, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius is a phenomenal book. Like, it's weird and like inventive, and it like breaks the fourth wall, which I love. But it's basically about, it is considered a memoir, I believe, although some of the events have been kind of fantasized a little bit, or not fantasized, but like there's fantastical elements to them. Not many, just like a little here and there. And it's about Dave Eggers, who loses his parents to cancer within 8 weeks of each other, and then becomes the sole guardian of his younger brother, and basically their life after that. And it's done in a really, really cool way. I don't know, it's really neat. He's got a list of like rules for reading the book at the beginning, which is interesting. But this was a bestseller, and also it was very critically acclaimed as well. I just wanted to point out that like right at the beginning of the book, it just says this was uncalled for, and I think that's hilarious. But anyways, and it was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, so it did pretty well for itself. I was really surprised that the same person that wrote The Circle wrote this, because they are so drastically different. And so are his short stories too. So I definitely want to read more by Dave Eggers. And I'm so glad that I was convinced to give him another shot. So definitely my biggest surprise. Really, really cool book. But yeah, if you like more experimental writing, I recommend this book. Or really, not even experimental writing, but experimental storytelling. Favorite new author. So this can either be a debut author or a new to you author. This one was pretty easy for me to pick. So I went with Riley Sager. I have now all 4 of his books that he's published under the Riley Sager pseudonym. So the first book I read was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I loved it. It's about an apartment sitter that is sitting this really, really nice apartment, but then she kind of starts like hearing things from one of the other apartment sitters, and there's like a lot of these strict rules about staying there, and then creepy things happen. It's a really great read. It's really fun. Very popular on BookTube. A lot of people have heard about it. Then, Home Before Dark. I just talked about this in my June wrap-up. Loved it. If you want to hear more about the synopsis, you can feel free to check that out. And then I just recently got, as add-ons of my last Book of the Month box, The Last Time I Lied and Final Girls, which came out before either of the other 2 that I've read, but they're the 2 that I haven't read by Riley Sager. I literally don't know anything about them, but I'm really excited to give them a shot. Okay, newest fictional crush. This one was tough. I don't really read romance books, so I decided to go with Sarah Harding from The Lost World, because she's just like the coolest ever. I feel a little weird and like narcissistic picking somebody that has the same name as me, and she even spells it with the H. But she's just so cool. Newest favorite character. So I was planning on not talking about this book until a video where this is one of the books I'm reading for it, but when this question was asked, I couldn't not, because I loved this character so much, and he's by far my new favorite character. Anyways, okay, you're gonna find out, so here we go. Kings of the Wyld, I recently read and loved. I'm not gonna say any more about it, except in reference to the character. But my favorite character from this book, and just in 2020 so far in general, his name is Moog. I don't remember his first name. He's a wizard, and he's kind of like kooky and crazy, and he has like these crazy risky ideas to get them out of situations, and he's super fun, but also he's got like a great backstory and a lot of depth to him as well. And I don't know, there's just like, he seems like a real character instead of like oh, he's just like this mad wizard that like does crazy things. He like starts as that, but then like you see more and more of the motivation behind him. I think he's just super well written. I think all the characters in this book are really well written. It's just that I loved Moog. That's all I really want to talk about it right now, just because that will be coming out as its own video, and then you can hear me gush all about that book then and see how I like the other books that are a part of it. Okay, book that made you cry, which could literally be so many different books. I am a huge crybaby when it comes to books or movies or TV shows or commercials sometimes. But I think 3 standouts for me would probably be Becoming by Michelle Obama. Wonderful book. Such a good read, which is basically about her life growing up and then also her life in the White House and a little bit of afterwards, leaving the White House and life after that, although not much, just a little bit. And then also Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, which is set in the marshlands of South Carolina, maybe North Carolina. But it is about a little girl that basically has to grow up taking care of herself, but she's super smart. She just like learns from the marsh that she lives in, and she's kind of like abandoned by her family. And then there's also like this murder investigation, which sounds random, but kind of have like these flashbacks, flash forwards, and it really like keeps the ball rolling through the story where like you can't wait to find out what happens. And then by the end, you're like in love with this character of this girl that you've been hearing about, like in between the pieces of mystery. It's so good. And then also Educated by Tara Westover, which is about a little girl that's the daughter of this radical family that don't believe in schooling, and they think that the government is trying to control them. And they have all this stuff like saved up for when the world is going to end, or for like Judgment Day, or for, XYZ. And this girl that's trying to kind of get out of this, but also reconcile with the fact that she does belong to this family and she doesn't want to completely leave it behind. So it's kind of her stuck in the middle of trying to like rise above this and get an education and become somebody that is more than just what her family has done, but also wanting to stay connected with where she's from and understanding why her parents are the way that they are, why her siblings are the way that they are. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's a really beautiful read. It definitely made me cry. Oh, and a book that made you happy. So this one I went with Meet Me at the Museum, which I think is by Youngson. So this was about 2 individuals that were in similar places in their lives, although they led very different lives, but they're feeling similar feelings to each other. And the woman reaches out to this museum about maybe going to visit, and she just has a few questions. And then the museum curator, he works for the museum, I don't remember what his job was, but he's responding to her, and then the exchange kind of just continues to go on and moves away from questions about the museum and just to life in general, and they talk back and forth. So the book is just like a collection of letters back and forth between them, and it's really sweet. They both evolve a lot throughout the story and in their own respective ways. I remember I read that book not too long after COVID really got started, and when we were all starting to realize that this was going to last a lot longer than we initially thought. And it was just a really nice and pleasant book to be reading during that time. Like anytime I was reading it, I just felt lighter. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that book. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. This, I have already talked about Dead Astronauts, which I got in January. But since I already showed this one, I wanted to show another one that I got more recently, which is called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And then you can kind of see like the shiny, I don't know how to explain the way that books look. But it's a really pretty book. It's about time travel, which is kind of cool. I'm going to be talking about this more pretty soon because I think that I'm actually going to be reading this for the reading rush. I know I already talked about my TBR for that, but I think that this is going to go ahead and replace Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as a book that takes place outside of the continent you live in. So this book is set in Tokyo. It's still short, so it's a good readathon length. And I also am dying to read it anyways, so that helps. So yeah, I will definitely be talking more about this book when I do my video about the reading rush. And the last prompt, what books do you have to get to before the end of the year? So this, I have a very specific group of books, because at the beginning of this year, I kind of made this challenge to myself to finish all the books that I had before the end of the year, so physically owned. So now this means that any book that I entered into the year 2020 owning, I want to have finished before the end of the year. And then going forward from that, I want to make sure I never own a book for more than a year without having read it. Eventually, I want to include ebooks and audiobooks, but that's not really realistic at this point. So currently, I'm just focusing on physical books. I have made a lot of progress in this list. I've read tons of books that I entered into 2020 with. In fact, the Lord of the Rings video that I just did, those books were the oldest books on my TBR. So that was a huge win for me, and it knocked out 3 of the most intimidating reads on that list. Okay, I can do this. But these are the books that are left from that list that I have not yet gotten to. This is all of it. And you may be thinking, why is there so much Kurt Vonnegut on there? I thought he was your favorite author. And that's a good thought. It's fair. I don't know, whenever I'm in a small bookstore, I feel like I want to support small bookstores, and so I almost always buy at least one book if I'm in one. It's been a bit, but you know, over the years. And always a safe bet for me is a Kurt Vonnegut book. Now, I have read quite a few books by him, but he's also published a lot of books, so I still have a good ways to go. So I did stop buying them a bit ago, like maybe 2 years ago. I made sure not to buy anymore. I think the last one is at least 2 years old in this stack. But I'm also weirdly scared to pick his books back up. I went through this phase where I read a bunch of them right in a row, and I loved them. And then I was like, okay, I should like take a break and read other books. And then I just like, that break never ended. And I think it's because I'm worried that, I don't know, like the next book I just won't like. But it's not like there haven't been books by him that I haven't like loved. Yeah, I think that's why so many have stayed on this list. But yeah, I plan on getting all of these read though by the end of the year. That was part of it. Like, I knew that I would have to just like rip the band-aid off and like get back into reading his books and like stop being such a baby about it. Oh, that was really hurting my lap. Okay, if you made it this long, thank you sincerely, because this took way longer than I thought. I thought this was going to be a really quick, easy like tag video, but I think it's just because it's about books that you're like really passionate about. I mean, yeah, and this has been like a really big 6 months for reading for me, and I read a lot of good books. I'm really happy with how my reading has gone so far this year, and I hope that the second half of the year gives me more of the same. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Also, I have made an Instagram account to go along with this YouTube channel. So that has, you know, announcements for when I post videos, but also some fun little stories here and there. And I've also taken to including some favorite quotes from some books that I've read. So if you want to check that out, that would be pretty cool of you to do. I'm really good at promoting myself, as you can see. Totally natural. Scout, can you end this video for me? Bye everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. See, it's okay when she says it. It's not self-promotion then.